got to do all we can to help. That means cooperating on counterterrorism, building our capacity on counterterrorism. It means dealing with the threat at source, whether that is ISIL in Syria and Iraq or whether it is other extremist groups around the world.
British Prime Minister David Cameron expressing solidarity with Tunisia, France and Kuwait following terror attacks in each of those countries today. The attacks happening within hours of each other, claiming at least 60 lives. Some of the victims were at prayer while others were at the beach. And according to reports from France, the head of one victim had been covered in Arabic writing and stuck on a fence outside an American-owned factory. So what does all this mean? Joining us now to talk about it from Newsmax Washington, Patrick Murray, retired U.S. Army colonel and the author of the book, Government is the Problem. Of course, Patrick, in that book, you are dealing with the rising debt, but internationally, terrorism remains a scourge and a worry for us. ISIS claimed responsibility for the attack in Kuwait, but so far, not the others. Do we have any indication that these attacks were related?
Well, I'm not so sure that they're coordinated, JD, but I do believe that they're linked. Look, it's Ramadan, and that's when these Islamic extremists, they have a history of ramping up their attacks during Ramadan. We listen, these guys, ISIS, they are Svengalis when it comes to social networking, and they also are terrific at exploiting those sectarian fault lines and between Sunnis and Shias. I think that's what you saw today in Kuwait City when the Shia mosque was attacked with a car bomb, and a lot of deaths there. And then they're also great at motivating the so-called lone wolf attacks. And I think that what we'll see is that's what happened in both Tunisia as well as in France.
Well, you mentioned the fact that it is now Ramadan and also the fact that ISIS encourages others to get involved in lone wolf attacks. Now, more troubling is the fact that ISIS is saying it has a major attack, a spectacular attack as we understand it, planned soon. Do you believe Western intelligence agencies have ramped up because it is Ramadan?
Well, I believe that's the case. We just had the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Nunes, just a week ago saying that the United States has never, even prior to 9/11, faced a higher threat for terrorism than we do right now. And you have FBI Director James Comey telling us that there are ISIS investigations going on in all 50 states, JD. Thousands of Americans are following ISIS on the internet. So it's a whole new ballgame. It's totally different than it was before. This threat has morphed, and it's much tougher to track, and that's the situation that we face right now.
Ramadan for the Islamic world, for us here in this country, Independence Day coming up. Do all signs point that direction in terms of a possible spectacular attack?
Well, I think I'd just encourage your audience, live your lives, but exercise extreme situational awareness and be aware of what's going on around you, especially when you get into crowds. JD, you mentioned the 4th of July, Independence Day. That's when we naturally have large crowds and events of that nature. And if I were the bad guy, you always want to try to put yourself in the head of your adversary. If I were the bad guy, that's what I'd be thinking about.
Well, let us turn our attention to another vexing problem, and that is Iran, and more specifically, that Iran nuclear deal. 4 days remain before the deadline, and at least with all external events, you would think the deal might be falling apart. And still, apparently, this administration is not going to walk away. Should it?
Well, you're right. They're running out of time. Tick-tock. They'll expand it if they think they need to. But here, to answer your question specifically, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei just came in and threw a total wrench into this whole process by giving his red lines, none of which we should agree to, especially with regard to verification and compliance. Khomeini said, look, you guys will never inspect our military sites, and I don't want any, quote, unorthodox inspections, which really just means short notice inspections. And that is a deal, that should be a deal breaker for us. And he also wants the economic sanctions lifted immediately. And really, that's what this is about for them, isn't it? They want those economic sanctions lifted. And we should not do that at all. We should have a timeline for that, at least, in my view, a year, to make sure that Iran is not in breach of whatever agreement that we devise.
Well, we will have to leave it there, but we'll keep our eyes on both of these situations. Our thanks to you, Patrick Murray, retired Army colonel and author of the book, Government is the Problem. You heard what the good colonel had to say. Do you agree with him? You can contact us via email, Facebook, Twitter, and newsmaxtv.com/comments.